Now it's time to talk about voting rights, where we stand now. For that, we turn to Ari Berman. He's a senior contributing writer for The Nation magazine and a fellow at the Nation Institute. His award-winning book, Give Us the Ballot, The Modern Struggle for Voting Rights in America, is out now in paperback. Ari Berman, welcome back.
Thank you.
With everything going on in Trump land, sometimes it's hard to focus on the fundamental issues, and voting rights is certainly fundamental. We want to talk about where we stand with voting rights at this point, where the battles are, what challenges we face, how we can prepare for the 2018 midterm elections. The Democrats need to win, I think it's 24 seats in order to retake control of the House. That's the plan. But in order to do that, Democrats have to be able to vote. We know the Republican strategy for a while now has been vote suppression. Democratic victories depend on voter turnout. Jeff Sessions is our Attorney General. What has he done since taking office about voting rights?
So I think it's important first to note that Jeff Sessions has a very long record of opposition to voting rights, which makes him quite unique as an attorney general. We've never had someone who became attorney general and had previously prosecuted civil rights activists for voter fraud, which Jeff Sessions did back when he was a U.S. attorney in Alabama in the 1980s. He's someone who said that the gutting of the Voting Rights Act in 2013 was good news for the South. When he was nominated as Attorney General, he was asked to refute Donald Trump's lie that 3 to 5 million people voted illegally. And Jeff Sessions said, I don't know how many people voted illegally, which was not exactly a very clear refutation of what Trump said. And one of the first things that Sessions has done as Attorney General has been to reverse the Justice Department's position in the Texas voter ID case and argue that that law was not intentionally discriminatory, which was very, very significant because if Texas's voter ID law is found to be intentionally discriminatory, and there's just a trial over this in February, then Texas may have to once again approve its voting changes with the federal government. So this was just the first thing Sessions has done, and it was kind of forced upon him because the court was going to have a hearing, but I'm fully expecting there will be lots of bad positions taken by the Justice Department on voting rights and on many other issues going forward under Sessions.
Well, Texas has been one of the worst states in trying to limit voter rights. Of course, it's by no means the only one. Where are the other battlefronts right now?
So just stepping back a little bit, 21 states since the 2010 election have passed new restrictions on voting, whether it's voter ID laws or cutting back on early voting or shutting down polling places or purging the voting rolls. And, this has happened across the country in important swing states like Florida and Ohio and Wisconsin, and then in sort of redder states like Texas. And 14 of these new restrictions were in effect for the first time in 2016. And we saw a depressed turnout in places like Wisconsin and North Carolina because of this. Now we're in a situation in 2017, some of those states are still pushing forward with new restrictions and other states are getting in on the game. So right now there are 78 bills to restrict voting rights in 21 states. And a few states have already passed new measures. Arkansas just passed a voter ID law. They had tried to pass a similar law in 2014, but it was struck down by the state Supreme Court as unconstitutional. Now they're trying again. Iowa, which is under Republican control, has passed legislation to require ID, also to cut early voting, to eliminate straight ticket voting. So that's a state that has previously not done these kind of things, that went for Obama twice and now went for Trump in 2016. So that's another place I'm looking at. But there's a bunch of bills in a number of different states. That's just at the state level. And of course, the dynamic that's now different is there's also a different regime federally. So before you had the Obama administration who was fighting back on this stuff, you had at the very least divided control of Congress. So Congress was out of the game. Now you have Republicans in Washington who are supporting these state efforts. And that's what's new and disturbing here.
Well, I know the ACLU and other voting rights groups and projects are challenging a lot of these restrictions in court. Some are succeeding A lot of them are not succeeding, but there's also a parallel effort to help voters get the ID they need. What can you tell us about this effort, and is it going to make sufficient progress between now and 2018?
I think there's been a few different ways on which these efforts to suppress the vote have been combated. As you mentioned, there have been a lot of lawsuits filed. The ACLU and other groups have had some success in places like Texas and North Carolina. Those cases, though, remain unsettled because a lot of them are on appeal. A lot of them are on appeal to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has deadlocked 4-4 in a lot of these cases. So Neil Gorsuch could be the deciding vote to make sure that voting restrictions in North Carolina and Texas and other places are allowed to go into effect, which I think would be catastrophic for voting rights in those states. At the same time, there are 100 federal court vacancies that Donald Trump is going to begin to fill. So when you're talking about Court of Appeals, district court decisions, those could go another way. So that's why the judiciary is really, really important here. And I'm really concerned about what might happen under Trump. There are efforts underway by groups like Vote Riders, by Project Vote, and others to try to help people get the IDs they need. I observe these efforts up close in states like Wisconsin, where they had organizers on the ground. They did a good job, but it's very, very difficult work. I mean, the people who, for example, might not have the right voter ID, these are often people from underserved communities, people at the lower end of the economic ladder, and they need a lot of help. This sometimes requires multiple trips to the DMVs. You have situations where people don't have birth certificates or they have errors on their birth certificates, and it's very, very difficult to get the documentation. So this can be extremely time-consuming work. It's really important organizing, but when people say, well, let's just get everyone the ID, I mean, it's not nearly as simple as you think for those people that don't have it, and that's just one component of this problem. So I think we need to see a lot more attention, a lot more funding for this work going forward.
And of course, while voter ID has gotten probably the most attention, there's also been the changes in polling place, the reduced number of polling places for minority communities, student communities. Where do we stand on those tactics?
Those tactics are ongoing. And that's what I always try to bring attention to, is it's not just voter ID, because a lot of people are hung up on this idea that everyone has the ID and you need it for all this other stuff, and what's the big deal? And, I've pushed back on that in a lot of different ways, talking about how not everyone has the ID, and the laws are written in such a way, like in Texas, where you can vote with a gun permit, but not a student ID. So clearly seems like there's some other motives here. But even if you accept that voter ID is necessary, then you still have to think about, why would you cut early voting, which is very popular among party lines? Or why would you close polling places, which nobody wants to do? Or why would you purge the voting rolls without notifying people in advance? That kind of stuff is also going on here. And these efforts are ongoing, and a lot of times we don't have advance notice of them. And there's a number of states in 2018 and 2020 that are going to be competitive, that are going to have these efforts going forward. So it's not just voter ID. I think it's really, really important to look at. That's what always gets the headline, but there's a lot of other things going on here.